Kieran is a Pokemon character you probably don't think too profoundly about on the surface, but lying beneath is a story of exclusion, obsession, toxic ambition, and eventual introspection. Let's take a stroll through the story of arguably the most chaotically arced character in recent Pokemon games. So when we first meet Kieran, he comes across as a very meek and timid young boy. He literally hides behind his sister when he first sees you, like he's scared of any form of stranger. But despite that fear, he's inquisitive. He clearly wants to learn about things and people, just from his own safe distance. And it becomes apparent that he sees himself as a bit of an outcast, a bit of a lone wolf. And this is hammered in when we're learning about the legend of Ogerpon and the Loyal Three. And Kieran takes much more of an interest in the supposed villain of the whole story. He admires Ogerpon for its independence and power, despite being just one being against the world essentially. We get the sense that Kieran not only idolizes Ogerpon, but sees an idealized version of himself in Ogerpon too. This lone wolf mentality drives Kieran into some really unhealthy thinking when we, the other characters, choose not to tell him about the encounter we and Carmine have with Ogerpon at the Festival of Masks. We do this of course for Kieran's benefit. If he knew he'd just missed the ogre, he might have gone running after it and put himself in danger. Or just been really heartbroken about missing out on seeing this creature he'd been idolizing for years. It was purely just to keep everything calm while we figure out the situation. But he sees this as everyone casting him out, and maliciously withholding information purely to spite him. Most explicitly when he hears us talking about the true nature of the Loyal Three, and when questioned about it, we essentially lie by omission, not knowing that he actually heard the whole conversation back at the house, rooting those feelings even deeper inside his head. I feel for Kieran here in a way, because those feelings are understandable based on the limited context and information he has to go on. He doesn't understand that we actually do have his best interests at heart. A problem here is that no one truly understands the depth of Kieran's obsession. Our over-reluctance to tell Kieran anything about what's going on makes the reaction when he does find out even more extreme than if we just told him. And this is where we get the first instance of him sort of acting out as a result of these feelings, where he steals the Teal mask, and we have to run after and defeat him in battle to get him to give it back. And the poisonous energy that's brewing inside him has a real-world impact here. It's a smaller detail, but one that a lot of people have noticed. But when Kieran punches the shrine in frustration, if you look carefully, you can see a purple mist emanating from the impact. Though it's not explicitly confirmed, this appears to be the catalyst for the Loyal Three's revival. The sort of toxic energy that gets released is so strong that it revives 3 evil Pokemon. And even when he calms down and apologizes, his mindset is still off. Ogerpon won't accept the mask back from Kieran, likely because his over-enthusiasm for it comes off as a little overbearing. So again, he eventually finds himself falling into the same spiral. When we retrieve all of the masks the Loyal Three stole, we're presented with an opportunity to battle Ogerpon and catch it. But because Kieran is the one who's been swooning over this Pokemon for years, he feels like he should be the one to become its trainer. And this shows how obsession can skew a person's better judgment. Because while it's understandable that Kieran would want Ogerpon to be his partner, his obsession is not allowing him to take into account Ogerpon's wishes whatsoever. Relationships of any kind are based on reciprocity. There has to be an equal exchange of desire. His jealousy in this situation takes over entirely. Again, you can understand Kieran's feelings here to an extent, but his obsession and entitlement take things over the line. And it results in what we see in the closing scene of the Teal mask, where Kieran appears to snap completely and begin his descent into a full-blown villain arc. He believes that we bested him and acquired Ogerpon through pure strength alone, and so now he becomes consumed by a new obsession, an obsession for power. When we arrive at Blueberry Academy, we're reacquainted with Carmine in the terrarium, where she tells us that Kieran hasn't quite been himself lately. At which point we turn to see Kieran scolding another student for his lack of ambition and work ethic. His entire look and demeanour has changed significantly. His hair is up, we saw him doing that in the final cutscene before. His clothes are different, and he carries himself with much more arrogance and egotism. We learn that in the short space of time between DLCs, Kieran has used this newfound mental brutality to climb to the very top of the pile at Blueberry Academy. becoming the school's champion trainer. Carmine is the reason we're here. She pushed for the school to invite us in the hope that we could snap Kieran out of this venomous state. And that we do. After passing the Academy's Elite Four, we face off against a much improved Kieran with a very well crafted team. And we defeat him. And it's a lesson in toxic ambition. Kieran's fixation on power for the sake of power means that he never took into account any of the nuances of becoming a truly great trainer in the Pokémon world. It's not just about assembling a squad of the most juiced up Pokémon you can find. It's about adventure and experience as much as anything else. Kieran finds out pretty sharpish that this approach leaves you in a pretty lonely place when that power finally does leave you, which we see firsthand as the crowd quickly disperses following Kieran's loss. No one comes to offer any consolation. His prestige was in his strength alone. When he loses that, he has to face the realization that he gained it in such a brutish manner that it was really all he had. A valuable lesson in how ambition can be toxic if that ambition doesn't come from a genuine place. He barely has time to come to that realization though before we're tasked with another trip down to Area Zero to search out the legendary Pokémon Terapagos. Kieran latches onto this immediately, as it's a legendary Pokémon even we don't know about. So he sees this as one last opportunity to gain the power over us he so relentlessly yearns for. But what do you know, the exact same thing happens again. And Terapagos takes an immediate interest in us, the player, after being released. Kieran, of course, feeling major deja vu coming on, whips out a Master Ball and captures Terapagos before we even get the chance to properly interact with it, showing that he's still tunnel visioned by this obsession to be better than us. Again though, he's knocked down a peg when he challenges us to a battle using Terapagos and still loses. And when Terapagos then terastallizes and overpowers even the Master Ball it was caught in, only then does Kieran truly realise how out of his depth he really is. How pure ferocity and arrogance are no substitute for actual growth as a Pokémon trainer. This was all a front for him. So when it actually came to a situation that needed a true champion, he obviously fell short. But at the same time, this experience is what finally brings out the real courage and potential inside of him. And he eventually pulls himself up, helps us defeat Terapagos, and in the end even cheers us on as we catch it. It took the whole of 2 DLCs, but Kieran does finally now realise the errors and bad choices he's made, and asks us for the chance to start over again as friends. He steps down from the BB League altogether, and takes a leave of absence from the school to rest and rebuild himself, so he can come back a more authentic trainer with a healthier mindset. And in the Mochi Mayhem epilogue, he is more akin to the Kieran we first met again, but with much more confidence. Obviously Mochi Mayhem isn't about him, but he comes across as more comfortable in his own skin, and an overall more composed character and trainer. I have mentioned before that I do feel sorry for Kieran in a sense, because we do sort of swoop in on his turf twice and instantly become the hero. But at the same time, it needed to happen. His character serves as a warning for unhealthy fixations, and how allowing them to consume you so wholly can never lead to a genuine payoff. We have to accept that we don't live in an idealistic world, that some things are within our control and some things aren't, and that you can't just bully your way to the top of the pile without missing out on some key stages of growth. Kieran always saw himself as an outcast, but in the end finally realised that you're only ever truly alone if you put yourself in that isolated position. I'm glad the Mochi Mayhem epilogue was a thing, because we got to finally see Kieran in a unintoxicated state. It was nice to see him battle alongside us and it feel like he was an actual ally. It felt like that much needed final piece to his arc. It was a chaotic but earnest character narrative. If you read Reddit and other forums, you'll most likely find people falling hard on one side with Kieran. Some people think he was a total jerk, some people really sympathise with him. But look at the big picture, and you'll see a young, flawed character that's finding his place in the world. And that's hardly ever an easy ride. This one certainly wasn't.